What's really important is what we call the zone of proximal development. That's the gap between what students can do independently and what they can do when they get support. And this is the space where we think learning and development happens.
As vozes do professor.
أصوات المعلمون.
老師有話兒
Teachers' voices.
Welcome to a new episode of Teachers' Voices, the podcast made of the stories of teachers around the world talking in their own words. I am your host, Nina Alonso, and in this episode we talk about learning variability. Childhood is a time of great change. Young people can show different skills and behaviors from one day to the next. They're also different from one another, and they grow up and learn in diverse environments. The more I talk to educators, the more I realize that different environments offer varying levels of opportunity and support. Educational systems and everyone involved in them should support the learning of all children, but systems often pay no attention to learning variability. So today, researcher Sarah Bichler tells us about learning variability and about how educators can account for it. We also hear from two teachers working with children from different age groups with varied learning needs and in diverse contexts. Meesha Arora supports teenagers in India, and Carmen Lina Maggi supports primary school children through music in Estonia. Let's first travel to Germany to visit Sarah Bichler. Sarah is associate professor in psychology at the University of Passau. She researches teaching and learning and is specialized in digital media. She studies learning variability and is particularly interested in how EdTech could assist teachers in supporting children's learning variability. Hi, Sarah. How are you?
Hi, Nina. I'm well. How are you?
I am great. Thanks so much for joining us.
Of course. I'm glad to be here.
Where are you talking from?
The center of Munich. It's raining, but it's been really hot, so we welcome the rain.
Today, we are talking about learning variability, which you have been studying. In what ways do individual children change over time?
I think it's a really fundamental question. It's really important to recognize children develop across multiple dimensions. They develop physically, cognitively, emotionally, and socially. And all these dimensions, they're really interconnected as they unfold over time. What I find really interesting when thinking about how children change is that not all change looks the same. So, for example, in language acquisition, children steadily learn more words. So each day they learn more vocabulary from when they are young children to early adulthood. And what we see here is this continuous development, right? But then there's this other type of change that involves more abrupt shifts. For example, children typically prefer cookies over broccoli when they're really young. So even when an adult says, I really like broccoli, they would offer, if you ask them, can you share with me, they would offer you the cookies. So only around 1.5 years, children develop this ability to understand that others have thoughts, beliefs, and perspectives or preferences like broccoli that are different from one's own. And once they have that ability, it's like they stepped on to the next stage and they typically don't go back. And I find really fascinating the continuous development, but then also these sudden jumps. And then you notice a difference in children. I wanted to highlight that we have these two types of change that we can look out for. When they grow, we can see those jumps, and then we can also observe this continuous development.
Thanks, Sarah. Over what time frames do children's characteristics change then?
I've been thinking about this question. It's generally difficult to answer, and I was wondering why. And I thought maybe that's part of the point. Different characteristics change on very different timescales. Some developments are really expected to occur within a certain window. So we're talking about this jump from having the ability to understand how other people think and that thinking might be different from my own. And we have a window where we expect that. But not all children make this jump or gain this ability in this window. So there's certain variability across children. And that doesn't mean that is something we should be worried about. It's more like a lot of kids just take longer to develop and they don't even need intervention. They will catch up at some point.
Well, I must tell you that as a mother, I only learned by observation that development happens on different time scales and variability is normal. Some children simply take longer in certain areas and may just need a bit more time and a bit of support. I just came back actually from the graduation of my son, who has just finished school with honors. And one would not think that this same child started secondary education struggling. I remember that on his first year in secondary school, he failed many subjects on the first semester, imagine. And just with the affectionate support of his cousin, he gradually started to be more motivated and engaged in school life.
I can absolutely understand that. My daughter skipped crawling and then she walked really late, but then she was pretty stable. She just never fell. So you get this anxiety like, oh my God, everyone else is doing this already. And you get worried. Time frames that we've established with research into children's development, they're helpful because they also help us notice, okay, so typically kids are able to do X, Y, and Z at this point, but then it is always important to look at every individual child and look at other indicators as well. If we look at the whole child and we see that they're not catching up in multiple areas, then that should be an indicator that additional help from outside would be beneficial for that child. But if we see that kids are a little bit slower in one area but really advanced in others, then I think there's also this trust they will catch up, that it may be depends on interest or any other factor.
True. I also got that with my daughter. Her kindergarten teacher talked to me once worried, telling me that my daughter, who was 3 at that time, did not know how to count until 20 like the other kids in her class. And I did not pay really a lot of attention to this because I thought that my daughter was more interested maybe in learning other stuff. But it is true that she might have been slower than other children in learning numbers at the beginning, but she ended up being quite good at maths and science, for example.
It's really fascinating because those experiences align with what we see when we do research on this issue. I think example for this time frame of development would be students' interest. And interest is highly dynamic. We have what we call situational interest, and that is interest that is really sparked by the situation. So, for example, a teacher does a hands-on experiment in science, and it's really exciting because maybe there's flames, and kids are super interested. Actually, they're not in general interested in science, but in this moment, it was interesting. So there's short-term changes in this characteristic. And then there's what we call individual interest, and that develops over a longer period of time and is sustained by, parents supporting the kids or teachers supporting that or other peers that are interested in the same thing. And so once you have that, it won't change that much. You probably stick with that interest and you do a lot in the area of that interest. So even within this, we can see that there's like short-lived changes and then long-term developmental changes.
How do these insights into children's development inform teaching practice?
It is really important, first of all, to understand that some of these developments simply take time. So for some abilities, especially in younger children, slower progress isn't a sign of laziness or lack of motivation. So there's no blame to the kids that are not there yet. It's really more about identifying how do we get them there, because this development is a natural process.
How can teachers account for these changes in the classroom?
I use kids' attention span as an example here because that develops in early to middle childhood. If you notice, you can adjust instructional strategies and design around that developmental stage. So younger children benefit more from frequent transitions between teacher input and then activities where the kids are actively engaged in their own learning. And older students, they may be ready to follow more complex explanations because they have the ability to sustain their attention. So I feel like teachers can really design the instruction that matches the learner's developmental stage. They do need to know a little bit about those stages, then they can adjust. And then there's this other way in which teachers can actually account for these changes. Because while these changes unfold naturally, the learning environment and the teacher play a crucial role in shaping the development. So there are strategies that teachers could explicitly teach. For example, younger students can process too many information simultaneously. The ability that we can process complex information develops into early adulthood. So the teachers can really create learning opportunities that help shape and accelerate the development.
Can you give me an example?
We could teach younger children strategies such as take notes to remember all this important information, make drawings, give yourself visual cues how information relates. You don't have to do that in your head.
Can EdTech help, maybe?
So this is the question that I'm excited about, the core focus of my own research. And I need to say that research clearly shows that EdTech holds real potential and real promise here, but it depends on thoughtful design and use. And what I mean by that is what we have just talked about, how teachers can account for developmental changes. What's really important in that respect is that they understand what we call the zone of proximal development. That's the gap between what students can do independently and what they can do when they get support. And this is the space where we think learning and development happens. So they can't really do it on their own. We give a little bit of help and they make a leap to the next step.
And how can these technological tools help teachers?
Teachers rely on powerful tools to identify the zone. They observe their own students, and then they interpret behavior, and then they decide how to support them. Or they could do something like formative assessment to gain insight into learning and understanding, and then responding adaptively to what you know about your learners. And EdTech can really augment and help the teacher in noticing and interpreting and even responding to the student's needs. It can scale that approach because it is easier maybe for a system to track student progress over time and synthesize information than for a teacher. And it's also maybe easier for a system to respond in real time with feedback to 30 students or multiple students and across multiple classrooms. It's just really something that teachers care deeply about, but they have a lot of responsibilities within the classroom. I think there's a second, less obvious potential when we use educational technology to support the teachers in noticing and interpreting student work or student behavior and progress. It frees up time for the teacher. So if the teacher doesn't have to collect all that information, synthesize it, analyze it, interpret it, when that is done by technology, teachers can spend the time on comparing their own judgments and insights with those generated by the technology. They can validate it. And then they have time that they can spend on interacting with students, which is the most important piece in the classroom. It also frees up time to help students who need you the most.
How can technology be designed to inform teaching then meaningfully?
It has to be grounded in pedagogical insight, and it also needs to be designed in ways that consider the broader classroom structures and routines and implement technology within that system with a clear purpose. So teachers and student voices need to be integrated in the design of such technology. I'm always approaching this from a design perspective. I start with a problem of practice. I'm asking teachers, what do you want to achieve in your classroom? What's difficult about it? And then I think about a technology that could support the teacher. But lots of EdTech that exists hasn't been designed like that. And the second piece to consider is, how does it fit into what I'm doing so that what I'm doing isn't separated from technology?
Can you give me an example?
I want kids to have conceptual understanding of, photosynthesis. How do I bring in a technology that helps them practice certain things or gives them feedback and integrate that with what I do? And I feel like the more connected that is, the better it will support students' learning.
Let's now travel to the west coast of the USA to visit Meesha, as she's also passionate about educational technology and interested in learning variability. Hi, Meesha. Thanks so much for accepting my invitation.
Hi, Nina. I'm so glad to be a part of this interaction that we're doing today.
I believe you are on your summer break, aren't you? Where are you talking from today?
I'm visiting California just to meet my sister. I otherwise belong to New Delhi. I'm part of the British school. And so I'm glad to get this started.
I have been wanting to talk to you for a long time. You told me that you were particularly interested in learning variability.
So, Nina, how it really works is at the British school, I teach senior classes. So I go from about grade 9, 10, 11 to about 12. So that's 4 years. Usually what happens is within these 4 years, there are students that come to us from sometimes different curriculums, right? The lovely thing has been done by British school is that differentiation and holding differentiation strategies while you teach in class has been an important topic for us so far. I've seen numerous such examples simply because in IBDP, economics that I teach here, when students come into grade 11 and 12, it's a 2-year course. We get to see students across the span of 2 years, and there is often remarkable changes. It's a big time span to be able to gauge how they started and how they've really changed over time. There are students that come from all over. It's an international school, so we often have some international students that would come by. So over time, what has happened is that I've also gotten to know my students a lot better. So usually within the 2 years that I have with them, I often spend the first 6 months just getting to know the child a little bit better. What ticks them? What is it that could be working for them? What could be their fears? How can we tone them down? How could I bring variability in my learning, in my teaching style, so that it could also cater to different kinds of students?
Could you share examples of students learning over time?
Couple of years ago, I had a student, she'd come from India itself, from a CBSE school, which is the local board that we have in India. Because she came in from there in grade 11, she had a certain kind of a mental block that, I've done CBSE, which is a very different curriculum from IBDP. For example, I can do learning, but I'm not very good at the long answer writing, the 15-marker long answers that IBDP requires. I will not be able to do well, no matter what. She kept saying over and over again to herself and often to me. And I would often tell her that, well, this is absolutely not the way to think. The regular curriculum that we have here, it's new for everybody, basically. But it took a bit of hand-holding. It took a bit of guidance across these 2 years to get that mental block off that you're nowhere at disadvantage. So sometimes we would see this in the form of lack of attention. Over this period of time when we did things like having her take the booster sessions with us over the break, meetings with the parents, one-on-one sessions with her, showcasing exemplars. That's when she also realized that, the work that she's done versus then exemplar quality work is not actually very different. It just maybe bits and parts, if you can add up, and the answers can get really much better. I remember when she ended the year, she may not have been the topper, but she really jumped up the grades. And she went back as a very confident student, and now in a university in Canada, very happy.
How do you take into account not all children developing skills at the same speed?
Critical thinking skills will develop over time. Your analytical skills will develop over time. Another example that comes to my mind is a student that was in class, but I was her extended essay guide, which is like a research question that you take up, almost like a 2-year kind of a work. And by the end, you've done your research, you've given a conclusive sort of an answer. And so the student had come from France, and initially she took a lot of time to just settle in. There are language barriers. There are also all sorts of things that you're also dealing with as a new student. And so initially it felt like, oh my God, this child might take a lot of time to grasp what it takes to write like a good essay. It looked like the student finally was able to give priority to things, was settled in a lot of other uncertainties that were there, and matured immensely over this time. So much so that it could turn out, even in the conversations that I would have with her about what she thinks, because she got time. So the way it ended, I love the way she came back and said that the whole essay over that period of time has added so much to her personality in terms of how she's been able to think, how she's been able to self-manage, and how initially it looked difficult. And then there was a period where it was steep learning. There were several aha moments that came right towards the end of the essay submission, very close, right? Where she was able to suddenly realize that, oh my God, like it starts making a lot of sense to her.
Tell me about your passion for technology in teaching.
I've often used AI to do formative learning in class, so formative assessments, or sometimes create assignments that would be fun, sometimes AI-based quizzes. So that's really worked well, where we often try to incorporate AI once the basic learning has happened. Using Claude Artifact allows me to create personalized quizzes. So what I often do is that the prompts that I give to Claude would be to create quizzes, which would be, let's say, themed quizzes. So they could be a BTS lamp-based quizzes. Every time you give a correct answer, you get a BTS lamp. And so you have to collect whatever is the total number of BTS lamps. And so that keeps the kids motivated. One important prompt that I give AI is to keep making the questions more and more difficult as they answer everything correct, which sort of makes it quite customized. So with each student who's going wrong, they can answer the question again. So there's learning for them. And there's also learning for the others who would give the correct answer. And the next question is a higher difficulty. That's really helped because students love doing this on their own, and they love comparing how many lamps they were able to get or how many attempts were taken before they were able to get all the lamps. And I love using character AI. I give students the opportunity to pick up a character. So pick up an economist, and AI takes the role of that economist, and then they ask AI or that economist questions about their theories. Right? This is also quite personalized because they are free to ask anything. It's like a doubt clearing session for them where they ask everything about, say, why is the aggregate demand down? Or do you agree with the theory of another economist? So things like those where they share the chat as a reflection just with me. So it's also personalized in a sense that students can ask questions their way. And I think that's also really been helpful because it clarifies a lot of things with students. I really like using ChatGPT as a feedback. So they take a scan shot or a screenshot or a scan of the teacher feedback on their tests and their assessments, and I ask them to upload it on ChatGPT and ask it to comment on it based on Cambridge standards or IBDP standards. Give them two glow and two grow strategies, right? So two things that are working well, two things that are not really working well. The quick thing that I would really add about the AI bit is there is a lot of AI that is there. Sometimes this AI is also coming in from companies which are not actually dealing with educators, right? So they don't actually have anybody involved in terms of educator in the process of making that AI. So often it is not the best fit.
Do you have any advice for other teachers?
I think the one key advice that I keep going back to, because I've heard it from my mentors, is KYL, know your learner. I think there is no better advice than that, because a lot of times, and especially learning variability, the time it would take for one learner to grasp something versus the other often stems from lots of issues, right? It could also be something as simple as the student is dealing with a lot of different things versus another one. One student has a different kind of scenario at home versus others, or just the kind of teaching that is happening in class is not the way they learn. Sometimes it could be as simple as that.
I also wanted to talk to a teacher who has worked with younger children, and I met Carmen Linamagi this summer at a workshop in Estonia. One evening, Carmen ran a participatory music lesson, and I could tell that Carmen was a teacher because she got all of us participating in this fantastic choral and instrumental practice. I learned that Carmen was a music teacher indeed, and a therapist with years of experience with different age groups in several schools, including Waldorf, and in different contexts around the world. I invited Carmen to share her understanding of learning variability. Hello, Carmen.
Hello, I'm Carmen.
Thanks so much for accepting my invitation, Carmen.
Thank you, Nina. I'm glad to be talking to you.
I believe you are now in Estonia on your summer break. Tell me about you.
I've been working in a school for special needs children in Estonia, and I've been teaching music for the children from the age of kindergarten up to 9th grade and even older. I've been leading music and singing circles. Currently, I'm working mostly as a music therapist, having both individual and group sessions. As I'm working with the children with special needs, including intellectual disabilities, developmental disabilities, genetical syndromes, autism, and also compound complex disabilities, then these children are anyway different. There are big individual differences, but they belong to the grades or to the classes according to their age. So the same age of children are studying in the same class, although maybe their intellectual capacity are different. Especially while working with children with intellectual disabilities, it's so important to take into account that it's not only the intellect what is developing, it's also how these children are developing emotionally and socially. So in this sense, they are quite equal in their social and emotional development, although also there are individual differences. So this kind of learning variability is already pretty great in the beginning or starting off with these children. Not to speaking about personality differences and also that someone can have good day or bad day this particular day. So they're very different from the beginning already.
Have you noticed that some children may not have been able to follow the average learning rhythm of a class, but they suddenly catch up?
Yes, I have experienced leaps in children's learning and development. They might have hidden skills and capacities, which suddenly at a certain particular moments reveal themselves. And it's important to find ways to explain musical phenomena, not only with words, but also to find creative artistic ways how to do it. For instance, we have been learning stuff of music, writing notes in such a way that we write them on the floor. And so children can move as notes on the lines and between the lines, being these musical notes themselves, and play the instrument which sounds like this specific note they are at that moment. And if the moving, let's say, is the child's strength and he or she likes to move around, it can be like a aha experience for him or her.
You now specialize in music therapy for children who need more support. Can you recall moments when students progressed in their learning?
There has been very special moments, for example, the child who has complex disabilities, intellectual disability, and he can't move, he's in the wheelchair. And then he has had already quite some time some musical tune or song, and this child is also nonverbal. And then suddenly at one day, in one lesson, he starts to hum exactly the same note or tune which has been sounding, and which is familiar to him, but now suddenly it comes out of him. And in individual lesson or musical session, there have been also very special moments then while playing or improvising with the child on some instruments, zither or lyre, suddenly rises a melody or tune which comes actually out of our common music making. So it's something like a totally new improvisational composition which suddenly arises, and its starting point is our meeting. So it's our common improvisation and composition which comes about, and it's something new and something what we created. And this can be also very energizing for the child.
As we come to an end, I would like to highlight some key takeaways from today's conversations that can help us educators to support children's learning variability. Children develop along multiple interconnected dimensions, and these unfold in different ways and at different paces. So not all change is gradual. Some developments, like vocabulary growth, happen steadily, while others, such as understanding others' perspectives, occur through sudden shifts. Teachers can recognize and respond to these developmental changes. Instruction can be tailored to match children's evolving abilities, like attention span or working memory. Educational technology holds great promise, but only when it's designed to support teachers, is grounded in pedagogy, and is integrated meaningfully into classroom practice. Thanks so much to Sarah, Meesha, and Carmen for sharing their insights today. And thanks to you for listening to Teachers' Voices. I hope you have enjoyed today's episode. And if you would like to learn more about our guest today, about learning variability, you will find links in the show notes. You can also engage with us on social media, including LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter, and you can join our WhatsApp group. Stay tuned for the upcoming bonus episode.